Very warm welcome to the Hungary House. My name is Ferenc Kumin. I'm the ambassador of Hungary here in London. And this is the first time when we co-organize an event with the Orthodox Conservatives Group. It's such a first time that I still need to memorize the name, as you can see. And this is our first event of the year, and we really wanted to have something meaningful. Because it's always great to start the year with something memorable and with which we can gather our friends and we look at this event as such a thing. You may ask the question if it's the most timely topic as we're surrounded by all kinds of difficulties in the world, in our own region. We have a war in our neighborhood. We have the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We have the cost of living crisis back in Hungary as well, here in the UK. We have soaring energy prices, all these kinds of troubles. Is it timely now to talk about family policies and what the governments can do for families? And my answer is a very big and loud yes. This is probably more timely than ever, because with all these troubles that are surrounding us, the uncertainty of the families, of the young couples, of everyone who is trying to plan ahead about his or her own life and about a new family, the help is more necessary than ever. And you will hear a lot about family policies, what we have in Hungary, what are the perspectives here in the UK. What I wanted to say, not stealing the limelight from anybody, just one concept that is usually used by mostly the opposite camp of what we do, is the concept of choice. And this is exactly what we try to do and what we believe in Hungary, because what we see in many cases that there are people who come together, love each other, they get married, they wish to have children, but because of all the uncertainties, they are not ready, they have all these other concerns, and probably they go to another direction. What we want to provide them and what family policies try to achieve is to have a choice. If the young lady wants to have a child, she could decide if it's the right time, if it's okay for the family, if she can fit it into her career plans, and the choice should be there, and the monetary obstacles shouldn't be a problem to make that decision. So our vision is that governments should go as far as to make this decision more an emotional, more an internally driven choice, but shouldn't be constrained by the wealth of the family or by the prospects of the family. And that's where we try to go. And the other aspect of the choice as well, if the child is already there in the family, we also try to provide options, a choice, whether the mother wants to stay home. There are multiple schemes in our system for that, but if she wants to return in a very early phase to her job, that's also perfectly acceptable, and we have a very widespread care system to provide support to this choice as well. So choice in every stage of the family planning and of the family life. That is in the heart of what we do. But also there are many wonderful other aspects of our family policies, but the timeliness of our gathering now related to the difficulties in our economies. And we need to, in a way, go back to stock taking. What can we do now? Because needless to tell you that family policies are indeed expensive. In Hungary, they take up 5% of our GDP. That's a big chunk of the government spending, as you can imagine. So what can governments do now, as we are all struggling with all the difficulties related to soaring energy prices and other problems, especially in our region. So to start the series of the presentation, let me introduce to you Zsófia Nagy-Vargha, who is Deputy State Secretary for Youth in our Ministry of Culture and Innovation, and her branch is also responsible for many of the family policies, and she is about to introduce to you what we do now and how we try to face with the new challenges today. So Zsófia, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I also would like to welcome you to today's event. It's a big honor to be here in London, one of the most important cities of European culture, and talk about the present and future of Hungarian family policies. I hope that this day will provide an opportunity to discuss issues that are of concern to us all. In my presentation, I would like to say a few words about the philosophy of Hungarian family policy, followed by a presentation of the most important elements of the current family support system. Finally, I would like to talk about the challenges we face, challenges that affect not only Europe, but the whole world. When we hear the term family in Europe, we may not always think of it in the same way. On our continent and in other parts of the world, there is no single concept of family. Public debates often focus on the question of what can be considered as a family or as a marriage. These debates make efforts to answer the crucial questions of our time, but I believe that they can only be productive if we try to understand each other. In our country, the fundamental law is clear. It believes that the family is based on marriage and the parent-child relationship. It also states that marriage is a union between a man and a woman based on voluntary consent, and that the mother is a woman and the father is a man. This is a principle for Hungarians and also the definition we would like to present to Europe when we talk about families. In 2010, a right-wing Christian conservative government replaced the left liberal government in power in Hungary. The new cabinet was given a strong two-thirds mandate to set a new direction and find Hungary's place in Europe. This has been a huge responsibility. In 2010, Hungary chose a national policy based on our internal resources. Since then, the protection and support of families has taken center stage, and the government has consistently and actively supported Hungarian families ever since. We believe the family is the most important unit of the nation on which we have relied for more than 1,000 years, and it is the guarantee of our future, so we don't want to break this continuity. When an influential English philosopher, John Locke, was discussing where man's knowledge actually comes from, he concluded that from experience, in that all our knowledge is founded, and from that it ultimately derives itself. Our experience is that we are a small nation in the heart of Europe, and as such we are ready to show respect to and expect due respect from everybody. That is why we firmly believe that families are the key to our future, or to put it more dramatically, to our survival. Hungarian family policy is therefore based on three pillars. Firstly, we ensure predictability. Secondly, we provide financial support for those who are raising or are planning to raise children. And thirdly, we believe that we can only respond effectively to demographic challenges by strengthening Hungarian families. Our family support system is very extensive and diverse, consisting of more than 30 elements, so please allow me to highlight just a few of them. In 2010, the childcare allowance was expanded from 2 years to 3 years and has been provided by the state to the families concerned as an automatic entitlement. In the year 2021, as many as 830,000 families benefited from our family tax allowance, which amounted to 698.4 million pounds. And we have introduced the so-called family planning grant, which helps couples before they have a baby. Namely, couples where the wife is aged between 18 and 41 can apply for a loan of up to 22.3 thousand pounds, which is interest and charge-free. If the family has at least one child within 5 years of applying for the loan, repayment will be suspended for 3 years and will be eligible for interest-free repayment for the full term. If a second child is born, repayment will be suspended for another 3 years and 30% of the outstanding debt will be cancelled. If a third child is born, the entire outstanding debt will be remitted. This support has contributed to the birth of more than 100,000 children in the last 2 years. Another big help is the so-called family housing loan, which provides a 22.3 thousand pound loan for 2 children and a 33.6 thousand pound loan for 3 children. The interest rate on the soft loan is 3%. As a result, many families across the country have been able to buy their own home. The state also provides free places for children in nurseries with free meals, and every child gets free textbooks until the end of secondary school. Fortunately, I could go on and on talking about similar measures. Our aim is to make our support system so complex that it can offer a solution for any kind of life situation. And if we had to name the key results of these policies, it would be the fertility rate, which has reached a 25-year high. We have the highest increase in the number of marriages in the European Union, and divorce rates have reached a 6-decade low. Hungary spent 3 times as much on supporting families in 2022 than it did in 2010. It is also an important achievement that we have been able to strengthen this system, even in the recent period of crisis, which has been difficult in many respects. Not even the coronavirus and the Russian-Ukrainian war on our doorstep have been able to break this pro-family orientation, which started back in 2010. As of the 1st of January 2023, more new measures have been introduced. According to one of these new measures, women who have a child before the age of 30 are exempt from income tax until the age of 30. This can result in tax savings of up to £2,000 per year. Also, as of January this year, the government has cancelled the full student loan debt for women under 30 who give birth or adopt a child during or within 2 years of finishing their studies. Previously, the student loan debt was halved after the birth of the second child and only fully forgiven after the birth of the third child. Ladies and gentlemen, in Europe, as in other parts of the world, we are living in a time of crisis with different difficulties and hardships. After the outbreak of coronavirus, war broke out in our neighborhood, shaking the peace that had been established after the end of the Second World War. However, in these difficult times, we must also remember that the future belongs first of all to our children, so ensuring their well-being is our priority. We want to make sure that our children, the generation that comes after us, will have an easier life than we or our parents did. The Hungarian family support system, with its constantly evolving framework, is based on that idea that everyone who wants to have children should be able to do so. And once these children are born, they should be able to live a happy, predictable life. And on that note, I wish you a useful and constructive debate today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Zsófia. And as you've heard, we are co-organizing this event tonight with the Orthodox Conservatives Group. And we have here with us Colonel James Bogle, who is the chairman of the group. And he's also a very determined fighter of family values. And what is even more important for the Hungarian heart, that he's a veteran of the Queen's Own Hussars. And Hussars played a very important role in the 19th century Hungarian army as well. So if someone is a veteran Hussar, that can only be a friend. But I guess we have many other reasons to like what you do with the conservative, with the Orthodox Conservatives. So please give us your initial talk and open in the name of the Orthodox Conservatives as well the event. The floor is yours, Colonel. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid I've forgotten to bring my horse, but I hope you'll forgive me for that. Well, welcome everybody, and I'm glad you've all been able to make it, and in so doing you've succeeded where I haven't. We the cavalry like to be there in the nick of time, but sometimes the nick of time plus a few minutes. Given the experiences I've just had with transport in London, which is all of you who live in London will know is a complete nightmare, I'm wondering if in fact we shouldn't change the subject to transport policy instead of family policy, but I will stick to my brief. Well, first of all, could I say thank you very much to the Hungarian Embassy for hosting this event, and in particular for not only hosting the event, but leading the way when it comes to family policy, if I may say so. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing a bit more about that later on. As you heard, my name is James Bogle. I'm chairman of Orthodox Conservatives. Orthodox Conservatives is a group which was founded in after the 2019 general election. Grassroots movement of social conservatives who operate as a think tank and a grassroots pressure network in the United Kingdom. We're very fortunate to have Anne Widdecombe as our president and a team of very dedicated, I'm happy to say also young people, a lot younger than me, I can tell you. And I think that's a very hopeful sign. We focus on things like the principles of law and justice, marriage and the family, community and civility, beauty and tradition. We get that from one of our former close friends, the late Sir Roger Scruton, whom, of course, doesn't need any introduction to most of you here, I'm sure. We have a number of reports coming up, such as on motherhood, fatherhood, and the family. We used to joke that liking motherhood was about as obvious as liking apple pie. But whilst I'm afraid today our leaders still like apple pie, they seem to be rather less interested in family policy and, in particular, marriage. Apart from being an ex-hussar and chairman of the Orthodox Conservatives, I am actually a practicing barrister in my normal day job. I have practiced in the family courts, a very depressing thing it is too, for those of you who know it, and most of you won't, because our family courts are all conducted in secret. And so as a result of that, I've seen firsthand the consequences of family and marriage breakdown. We talk a lot about the consequences, but what do we do about it? Nothing like enough. In fact, frequently, we make it worse. With every new piece of legislation that passes through Parliament, the legislation seems to be almost determined to make it worse. And the real issue, which is family breakdown, is either ignored or shelved. Talked about sometimes, and then shelved. In Britain, statistically, children growing up in a two-parent, male and female family have, and again I say statistically, a better education, health, and relationships record than those who do not. Children of married couples who stay together have, on the whole, and again statistically, better mental health, higher self-esteem, are more likely to have stable relationships themselves, and are less likely to end up as a burden on the state. Now, you would have thought that would have concentrated the minds of politicians, who are, of course, all the time worried about where the next slice of money is going to come from, so they don't have to increase taxes. They find there is no slice of money and they have to increase taxes. Therefore, you would have thought they would have been concerned about anything that is likely to be a greater burden on the state. Well, they are, except when it comes to family policy. For some reason, on that issue, they seem to be much less concerned. Some of the problems facing families, at least in this country, I'm sure it'll be the same and similar in many other countries, although perhaps less so in Hungary, on account of your family policy. But some of the problems here, at least in the United Kingdom, that affect directly family policy and at a practical level. In other words, at the level of young people wanting to get married and have a family, which is the most normal and natural thing in the world to want to do. There are just barriers in the way. For example, extremely expensive housing. With no hope of ever being able to own a house big enough for a family, it's going to put you off wanting to get married at a time when perhaps you ought to be able to. Higher divorce rates have worsened this, because if you have one family needing one house, when they break up, you need two houses or more. Unnaturally low interest rates have also affected families because they encourage buy-to-let landlords instead of outright sale. A regressive income tax system, which discriminates against single-earning households. We talk big about discrimination, our politicians do, our elites do, but when it comes to discriminating against a single-earning household, apparently discrimination is perfectly all right. The benefit system, for example, is based on households, whereas our UK tax system is based on individuals. Tax rates are also far too high. For example, someone on a salary of £21,000 a year with a student loan to pay off will be paying a 41% marginal tax rate, 20% income tax, 12% national insurance, and 9% student loan. 41%. how are they going to afford to start a family? That's a very real problem. Another problem, compulsory woke education in schools, taking responsibility away from parents for parts of the upbringing of their own children that should be exclusively that of the parents. And some of this woke education is of a nature and kind that can, unfortunately, often sexualize children at a very young age. In any other context, that would be called child abuse. But apparently in education, it's all right. And this causes lasting harm and damages future potential for family relationships. These are just some of the many, shall we say, countervailing influences that are currently influencing our families and our family policy in a way that causes family breakdown or prevents families and marriages starting in the first place. Stronger families are not just desired, they're essential. In economic terms, the price of family breakdown as of 2016, and it will no doubt be as bad or worse now, has been estimated at some £48 billion per annum. Roughly £1,820 per taxpayer, the cost of family breakdown to the taxpayer every year. Actually, the true economic cost of failed families, or I won't call them failed, I'll call them family breakdown, is likely to be much higher than that because, of course, there are a lot of invisible causes and harms that aren't easily measurable in statistical terms. It's a huge problem. It's the elephant in the room that policymakers constantly shy away from it. Well, now is the time to stop shying away from it and to do something about it. Many of modern society's ills, including drug abuse, suicide, cycles of crime, and antisocial behavior, can be traced back to family breakdown. The gang culture that pervades in cities in the United Kingdom, not least here in London, is often associated with lack of family structure. And that in turn is brought about by family breakdown. In 2017, it was estimated that 2/3 of knife crime offenders under the age of 25 came from a background of family breakup. 2/3. The evidence is clear that those families that remain together and are stable and are more likely, therefore, to be wealth creators compare far more favorably with fractured families, families that break down, which are far more likely, as I said earlier, to end up as a burden on the state and to suffer from many disadvantages, not least, of course, the children of those families. We talk a lot about protecting children, about safeguarding. Well, how about safeguarding them within the context of the safest place they can possibly be, which is an ordinary family? In Britain, we also face a demographic crisis as a result of persistently low birth rates. This is something also that's being addressed, as I understand it, in Hungary. And this, I would suggest to you, is the unsurprising consequence of making parenthood and family less and less of a priority for policymakers. On the other hand, Hungary's pro-family policy has been widely regarded as successful. No doubt there are various people at the top of the European Union who disagree for purely political reasons, but we'll leave them aside. The rest of the world has seen that it's a successful policy, not only in protecting families and their members, but importantly, and we forget this, in helping to develop the economy. And this has been shown, as I understand it, in Hungary, where the Hungarian economy has greatly benefited from a sound and sensible family policy. Once again, thank you very much to the Hungarian Embassy for allowing this event this evening, and thank you all very much for coming. And I very much look forward to hearing more from our Hungarian friends as to how they have solved the problem, and from that, hopefully, we can learn how we too might learn to solve our family breakdown problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Colonel. Thank you for your kind words. I haven't touched on the voc education as you refer to that. We have in Hungary a piece of legislation in place for now more than 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, and that triggered a lot of controversy in Brussels. And we're still in the fight for some 7 billion euros worth of funds that are partly frozen because of this misunderstanding between us and our Brussels friends. But it's going well. We're good at explaining our positions, and we are patient people, so it works for us. So now, with these two initial talks, we move to the panel format, and let me invite to the stage the members of our panel, and let me start with another official, if you like, of the Orthodox Conservatives Group, the honorary president, the person who needs no introduction at all, a conservative icon, and Widdecombe, who's been in Westminster for many years, but also served in the European Parliament. He's an author. He's often in TV. Just appeared this afternoon in BBC, as I heard, and we're so pleased that you're here with us. So please join us here on the stage. You have a little tag on your chair. Let me also invite another committed fighter for family values who works tirelessly in the House of Lords to represent these ideas and values. And among many of the results of his work is the network of family hubs in the United Kingdom is visible, and it's a very interesting new initiative. So please join me in welcoming on the stage Lord Michael Farmer. And representing Hungary, we have a former diplomat colleague, actually, with us, who now works for a think tank that is devoted to work on the family-related issues. It's called, in English, it's a tricky translation, Maria Kopp Institute for Demography and Families. And it has a very nice abbreviation in Hungarian called kincs, which alone means something. It's a meaningful word. It means treasure. So it's really a nice name for this institution. And Balázs is the Vice President for Strategy and Coordination. So please welcome Dr. Balázs Molnár also on the stage. And now, so we would start the panel with an initial statement by all guests, but let me just start to bring in some ideas about where we are. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the UK, started this year with a speech, and there were many interesting things in the speech. It's always a big job for the diplomats to report home about it, but we in particular noticed a sentence in that, and I quote the Prime Minister here: "Family runs right through our visions for a better future." And so that immediately, of course, triggered our attention as we in Hungary deal so much with family policies and how they can be implemented in our everyday work. But seemingly here in the UK also there's an increasing attention towards family values. We know how difficult it is here as well. We hear about the inflation, all kinds of crises up and down the country. How is it possible these days to implement new family-related policies? What is the vision today? So let's start with you, Madam President, and how do you see the chances for a new family-oriented policy here in this country?
Well, I think they're fairly slim at the moment. One of the things which has concerned me for a very long time, it's hardly been touched on tonight, is that if a family is a man and a woman and the children, then it is important that the man plays a role in the family. And yet the situation with our family courts is that access is nearly always awarded to the woman if there's been a breakup, or indeed if there's been no marriage in the first place, or whatever it might be. That I don't have a problem with, particularly when the children are young. But what we then have is a situation where even if the courts say that the father must see the children on such and such a number of days a week or a fortnight or whatever it might be, what then happens is that if the breakup is not amicable, the woman can frustrate that. But the man is nevertheless pursued by the child maintenance service to keep the children that he's not allowed to see. And we're getting an increasing number now of suicides on the part of men whose only crime is to want to see their own children, but who are being pursued almost vindictively, and I actually say that, almost vindictively, by the child maintenance service, but at the same time are not actually able to see their own children. And I have been trying to draw attention to this for a very long time, because it is very easy to see family policy in terms of the mother, but actually there are two parents involved. Families need fathers, children need fathers, they need stable male role models in their lives. The second thing where I see a huge gap in our public policy and not much will to redress it is indeed, as we've heard, the situation of the family which is maintained by a single earner. So the mother or the father sometimes, but usually the mother, stays at home, brings up the children. What is more important than bringing up tomorrow's citizens? And yet we're being persuaded, and have been over a number of years now, that somehow a woman isn't really worth much unless she goes out and becomes economically active in her own right. Whereas, in fact, bringing up the children, we would once have considered probably the highest vocation that you could have. That role has now been diminished. And indeed, I hate to say this as a Conservative, but it's true. Cameron and Osborne, when they were running the show, gave the impression that they wouldn't be happy until every single woman in the country was working. And so they discriminated against the single earner family in, for example, the arrangements for child benefit. And two people who were earning much more than a single earner could get the child benefit because they claimed separate incomes, but a single earner who was only just above the threshold couldn't. Now, there is something profoundly wrong when we discourage people from the traditional family unit if that is what they want. I'm not saying they should be compelled to do it that way, but if that is what they want, they certainly shouldn't be discouraged. Now, when I look at those two questions, the position of fathers and the position of the single earner household, frankly, I don't see any movement at all towards either addressing it or even giving it any sort of priority. Any sort of priority. It's all very well to make grand statements in speeches about how, the family is the bedrock of society, blah, blah, blah. That's no good unless you actually use that also as a basis of policy.
Thank you so much.
That's my rant for the day. Yeah. Right.
Thank you. We had a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, we had a meeting with Lord Farmer where he told me about his work that he does with mostly families in danger, typically on the edge of the society, and how family ties are involved to do something with these vulnerable people, pretty often related to prison as well. So tell us a little bit about the background of this work. How did you arrive to these kinds of policies that you actually you were instrumental in the implementation as well? And now we talk about existing family hubs all around the country. But what is the philosophical background, if you like, of this kind of approach, and how you personally got to these conclusions?
Thank you. Thank you, Andres. Am I on? It's on, I guess. Anyway, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'll just, first of all, say that I'm fully in line with what Anne's just said, and particularly I was treasurer of the Conservative Party during the years 10 to 15 with Cameron and Osborne. family was mentioned the whole time, but actually nothing was done. In fact, at the end of it, it almost went into reverse. So I would completely agree with Anne. I just want to, the ambassadors asked me to go back a bit into the sort of philosophical side of it. I want to look at the challenges facing family policy in hard times by looking back to the mid-19th century in the UK and the effects of the social and sexual revolution which started in the 1960s. Yeah. Its trajectory profoundly affected how men and women, mothers and fathers, worked together to do family. Recently, I led a debate in the House of Lords about the causes of crime. The very idea that there are causes of crime is relatively new. The late Professor Christy Davies states it was not until the 1890s that thought processes of the educated and prosperous elite became causalist. They looked down, he said, at a mass of weak people divided into the virtuous and the offending only by chance opportunities and adversities that caused them to act as they did. They were not truly agents. Today we would call them victims, those who feel helpless and passive in the face of misfortune or ill treatment. This came at the tail end of the half century up to 1900, which saw a decline in deviance in the UK, a drop in crime and social disorder directly linked to the influence on popular morality of religious institutions, notably the Sunday schools. These turned out such relatively law-abiding young people that the average age of prisoners rose. The turning point of this decline in deviance was the First World War. This is the point when crime rates start to flatten out until the late 1950s, just before the so-called swinging 60s. The line on the graph then began to climb upwards to produce what is now known as Davies' U-curve of deviance. It charts a fall, plateauing, then subsequent rise in crime, but also drug and alcohol abuse and births outside of marriage. Davies associates this rise with a decline in moralism. Knowing the difference between right and wrong, he implies individuals have autonomy to choose whether they behave with, as he put it, virtuous innocence or deliberate guilt. Moralism was gradually replaced with an ever-expanding legal corpus. To give an example, when I started in the City of London in 1963, its famous motto was, "My word is my bond." A complete trust in a word and a handshake slowly gave way to a recognition that one was bound only by what the law allowed or forbade. Religiously reinforced moralism, with its totemic notion of free will, was replaced by causalism I described earlier, the loss of commitment to and identification with religion, country, led in turn to a loss of the idea of service, sacrifice, the moral driver of duty. We adored our Queen, partly because she represented these virtues which are self-evidently right and needed. Emerging from the 1960s was third-wave feminism, which has had good and bad effects on how families function. Women are now treated on far more equal terms, but what they do in the home, child rearing and domestic management, including how to cook and live on a budget, was sharply downgraded in importance. Yet someone needs to run the home front, not necessarily the woman. Men have been subject to a toxic trio of cultural and social forces. They've been demonized by radical feminism, the importance of fathers has been greatly downgraded, and the economy has been deindustrialized. Many men now wonder what their purpose in life is. So what challenges does all this represent, which family policy has to solve? First, help with the cost of raising a family. We've heard tonight our taxation system overtaxes single earner families. The expectation that each family will have two breadwinners, often full time, earning more or less continuously, has fueled house price inflation. Demand for childcare with all the regulatory costs that help make it so expensive. There's an arms race, actually, between the political parties today who can give most free childcare. Liz Truss was planning to give 50 hours free childcare, that's 10 hours a day. A child woken at 6 a.m. to get to childcare for 7 a.m., not picked up till 5 p.m., would mean parents have not much more than 1 hour per weekday to instill their values and nurture their child. That amounts to state-funded neglect, and we are surprised that children struggle to get their parents' attention and that the children have mental health problems. It also means higher taxes to pay for it all, less choice for the parents. It becomes harder than ever for them to afford to work, less to spend time with their children. So what about solutions? Whatever the government does, and I agree with the ambassador who said in the beginning, it has to increase choice. That can be partly achieved through treating the family as an economic unit by enabling one spouse to transfer all of their unused tax allowance to the other spouse who earns most, and or allowing parents to get more child benefit in the early years and less than when the children grow up to be teenagers, also known as front-loading child benefit. Second, help with relationships and other family difficulties, including those arising from having a low income. I talk about relationships, but what happened from the 1960s onwards, we've been living in an era of what I call individual liberalism. It's that motto which says, do whatever you like, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. But of course, when you do whatever you like, you're going to hurt somebody, particularly when it comes to neglecting the family. So another dubious gift from extreme feminism is the entrenched assumption that it's a woman's right to have a child without a man, and the state needs to make that possible, whether through fund-assisted reproduction or single-parent benefits. But the relationship of the two people genetically responsible for bringing a child into the world provides the relational blueprint for their children and sets their psychological world for good or evil. Many parents from across the income spectrum were not properly parented themselves and need help to avoid the cycle repeating. Many are coping with very challenging life events such as bereavement, disabilities, unemployment. So the ambassadors mentioned the solution, family hubs. Family hubs we've been pressing for since 2007, started with the Centre for Social Justice. In fact, my colleague here, Dr. Callan, who's just done a government review, funnily enough, on child maintenance, which is worth looking at. She was one of the original ideas behind it. It's taken 15 years with a lot of pressure on government to actually get it into the Conservative manifesto. It was Rishi Sunak as Chancellor who actually allocated £130 million to it, which is funding half the local councils in the country to set up family hubs. Now, a family hub is basically what it says, it's a hub, and you've got the spokes coming into it of every government department which offers family services, which should cross-connect, cross-support one another, the local council services, and the voluntary sector. So you've got all those three sectors going into the family hub so that it's there to strengthen families, to keep families from falling apart, including the courts. I was talking to a justice minister today, and he wants to sort out how we can have some of this conflict resolution in a family hub rather than a court. So we're really pressing this, but there's still a long way before we have full commitment from the government on it. But family hubs are moving in the right direction and underlining the importance of relationships and commitment. I mean, I did 2 reviews for the Ministry of Justice on how to strengthen prisoners' family relationships in order to reduce reoffending. They had their own statistic that prisoners who received family visits were 39% less likely to reoffend than those who didn't. And when I went and saw men in prison, you know, the one thing I noticed, they didn't have responsibility. Getting back to that word responsibility. I said, we've got to give them responsibility. They can still be a father, they can still be a husband in the prison cell, they can do storybook dads, they can write letters, they can commit. It's this commitment that we're talking about here in families, in marriages. You make a public commitment in a church or in public. I will be with this woman for life. Those who make that commitment, as we heard earlier from the ambassador, they have greater advantages than those who don't.
Thank you so much, my lord, and congratulations to the establishment of on the family hubs. And typically, these are the solutions and ideas that are worthwhile to take a look at by other countries as well. And I guess this is the most important, this could potentially be the most important reason for us to be here together and share the experiences of two countries. And I guess that we should really take a deep look into how it works and what can we copy eventually, if it's not has copyright, I hope not, in our system, and see the benefits of that. And also what we try to offer to other countries and to the UK as well, that why don't you take a look at Hungary and the family policies that we have already introduced as an experimental lab, and you can see what worked. You could also see what hasn't worked that well. But what we can now provide you with is eventually a handful of experiences, outcomes, results, and the institution that is represented by Balázs Molnár here is probably the key institution in charge of taking stock of these results and trying to provide scientific knowledge to the government and to the decision makers about how to proceed, what to continue, what works and what doesn't work. So in that sense, what are the initial conclusions and where are the first results of these policies in Hungary, Balázs?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Indeed, it is my pleasure to be here in such an important and distinguished round. Madam State Secretary said a lot of things about already what has been introduced in the last 12 years. But we also know some data already which underpin the success of the Hungarian family policy. But may I start with a couple of characteristics and which are actually unique in the Hungarian family policy? Because there are many ways how we look at, or how the government looks at, how to aid families, how to help families, which might be worth mentioning in a very, very short manner. And I will come to the figures as well following that. First of all, there had been a new constitution adopted in 2011, and that new constitution, apart from what the State Secretary said, it's very important that it reverts from the individual towards the community, and then says that the most important fundamental unit of society is the family. So we are trying to break with that individualistic approach, which is so prevailing in the modern days in practically all developed countries. It's very important that the Hungarian family policy links most of the family benefits to legitimate employment. It is also very important that there is a straight and very important division between family policies and anti-poverty measures. So the state does introduce a lot of measures in order to fight poverty and child poverty, but does not necessarily seize family policy as one of the aims and one of the drivers for that. But there is also another graph, so to say, that where do we have a lack of children? It's the very poor who has a lot of children, and the very rich who has a lot of children, whereby the middle class and also the upper middle class misses out. So it is very important that we help the childbearing and child rearing also of middle class families as well. This is something which is very alien to Brussels, for example. So exactly because of this, usually we do not apply income levels as we would like to help all families. There are some options where we do apply income levels, or for example, when you do not have to pay any personal income tax under the age of 25, or when you are a woman and you get a baby under the age of 30. The exemption of the personal income tax is only until the level of average income. So if you are a broker and you are 25, you will not be exempted from paying the most share of your income, actually, which I believe is just, by the way. And there is a real option. We've been talking about options. There is a real option to stay home as long as 3 years with a child in Hungary, or go back to the labor market after the 6 months of age of the child. And this is left at the discretion and at the autonomy of the family. And also, I believe very important, staying home is also a real option, and this is also supported. Because what has been lacking in Hungary, for sure, and I believe it lacks in most of the developed world, is the recognition of motherhood. Motherhood, fatherhood, and the social standing of child rearing. We've been addressing that. I believe this is something where Hungary is offering a great deal of autonomy for the families. And yes, it is very important that we build hubs, that there is an alliance working for families. In Hungary, we have an alliance between the state, the local governments, the churches, the civil society, media actors, and so on, who all together work for families. I believe this is something very important, and we do have to nourish that working together and that method of dealing with things. And then there are some measures which no other country uses. Personal income tax exemption for mothers raising 4 children. This had been introduced in 2020 already. Roughly 55,000 Hungarian women benefit from it. So from a budgetary perspective, it is not a big deal of money, but it is such a nice recognition of those who stayed home many years, missed out on career options. They will be rewarded with not having to pay any personal income tax. Here we do not apply a cap, by the way, and it goes career long. This is actually copied by our Polish friends, but no one else. We have also an exemption for those who are under the age of 25. They do not have to pay personal income tax. And this is also something where we would like to help the young generation to start their own family, to move out of the mama hotel and the daddy bank. We all know that this is a big problem now. And of course, there are quite some measures which would like to reinstate also the social recognition of marriages, and we can incentivize people to get married. For example, in the big housing scheme, which Hungary has, you can also opt for getting the subsidy and the loan as well for those children whom you do not yet have. So to say, for future children, but only if you are married. You can get the subsidy, you can get the loan if you already have the children, also as a single parent, also as cohabiting couple, but you can also opt for future children if there is a marriage, because marriage brings along the stability as well. As you are very rightly saying, in front of the church or in the city hall, you are saying that I will commit to this family. And of course, I believe it is indeed very important that we look at the numbers also from that angle. In Hungary, until 2015, we followed the example of Western European countries. We had roughly 50 children born in and out of wedlock. Whereby in 2015, also because of these measures, it did turn, and now we have 70% of the babies born within the wedlock in Hungary, which we all know that this is very important. And this is also from the demographic sense is very important, because we all know from previous studies and analysis of many numbers that those who are married will have more children than those who are only cohabiting. Again, stability, as the State Secretary very rightly mentioned, stability has to be shown to the young generation. And I would like to mention one more issue. Hungary is still, despite quite some development in the last 12 years, is a relatively poor country. So families have to be helped in order to gain some more assets. If we ask Hungarians where they would like to live when they are 45, 92% of them say that they would like to own their own home. It's a very Central European characteristic. By the way, practically everyone around us says the same. It's much higher than in Western Europe. But actually, it is roughly 50-60% practically everywhere, apart from Denmark, I believe, in the European Union. So it is something which is indeed very important for them, that we help them to create their own home. And why is it, again, very important? Because if we ask young people about which are the three most determining factors about deciding upon the number of their children, the first is partnership, marriage. Not easy to find partners nowadays. Second is stability of employment. In Hungary, we have the fourth lowest unemployment figure, 4.1%, and we have, in a country of 9.7 million, 1 million more in employment than we had in 2010. So that's okay, so to say. And the third one is owning a home, a proper home where you actually can have, you do have proper space for having the children. And we have some very good figures, again, studies where we can relate back to, is that if we ask Hungarians how many children they would like to have, it's much more than 2. According to our last figure, it is in average 2.37. So even if we manage to close the gap between 1.6 and which is the current fertility rate in Hungary, and of course the 2.37, and we reach 2.1, that is the replacement level. That's what we are aiming to reach. And then maybe going through the numbers, I have already mentioned that we have a very nice growth in the babies born within the wedlock. We also can state very proudly that despite the fact that in the last 10 years we had roughly 300,000 less women in the childbearing ages, up until last year we still had more babies born than in 2010. We have a 24% increase in the fertility rate, which is the second highest growth among European Union member states. And just because of this fertility growth, so between 1.23, which means that 100 women get 123 children, to 1.59, which means 160. Just because of this growth, we had 150,000 more babies born in the country, where usually we have 90,000 babies born a year. So in a decade, more than 1.5 year amount of babies more just because of this fertility growth. And we have a very nice reduction in the number of abortions, 40%, without limiting the access to abortions. And we would like to continue very much on that track. We have twice as many marriages last year than we had in 2010. And the last time we had so many marriages was 1986. So it was quite a different world, especially for Hungarians. And then in the number of divorces, we also can register less divorces, which is also quite nice. There, roughly 30% less divorces were registered in 2021 than in 2010. So more marriages, but less divorces. Hopefully this trend continues. And I would also like to speak a bit about female employment, because as we have both of us said that it is very important to have the autonomy of the family to decide upon whether a woman would like to, or mother would like to go back to employment. Yes, she can stay home, but yes, she can also go back to the employment. It is held by a public nursery system or network, which had been very nicely developed over the last 12 years. We have 70% more spaces. These are community-run or municipality-run places, which are practically free of charge and of very high quality. And also because of this, we managed to increase female employment by nearly 20% in the last 12 years. So again, it is very important that who decides to wish to go back to the employment can do so and leave the babies, leave the children in these nurseries. But it is very important that we also mention that we have one big debate with the European Union. These are the famous Barcelona targets, that how many nursery places you actually would like to have or have to have. And we fail badly. And why do we fail badly? Because 98% of Hungarian nursery children are over the age of 2. Because practically there is no Hungarian women who would ever give a child of a couple of months or even 1 year to a nursery. And we can't explain it to them. I once had a discussion, if I may, just tell a very short story, with in my previous position with the director, a German one from the European Commission. And then I told them that we value motherhood per se, and then we believe it's nice that you can actually stay home long with a baby if you wish so. And then he looked at me and said that, and well-educated women do that too. And I said, yes, they do it too. And you know, it's a loss of investment. Because she was not trained to be home with a baby, she should hire someone who is much less educated to take care of the child. And then I explained it to them. I myself have 3 children and an LLM lawyer wife, and she stayed home a couple of years with our children. And then I explained them that it's not necessarily the same if someone whom you pay, even with all the love and tenderness, takes care of that child. It's not the same as a daddy or a mommy taking care of that child. So there we have a lot of explanation to do. But maybe I would like to finish with one notion here. We've been speaking about how to tax families in a just way. And I believe that Hungary taxes families in a very just way, because we introduced family taxation already in 2010, when Fidesz came into power again. In 2010, still from the previous left-wing governance, we had 100,000 Hungarians benefiting from family taxation. That time, you could only get family taxation or family tax cuts if you had 3 or more children, and that resulted into 12,000 forints. Let's stick with forints now. When Fidesz came into power, it reintroduced right from the next year, so from 2011 onwards, the taxation after every child. So even if you just had 1 children, you already got a tax cut monthly, roughly 30 pounds, 25 pounds a month. And it went up to a significant amount of roughly 80, 90 euros a month if you have 3 or more children. And now 1 million Hungarian benefit from family taxation, so tenfold of those than in 2010. And of course, we have these possibilities for those who are young, those who give birth in a younger age, and of course those who ever raised 4 children. And there's a last notion, economically seen. This family taxation roughly left 1 billion euros at the disposal of the families. And that in the last 11 years. And that money is nearly by 100% spent within the internal economy of the country. So it fuels internal consumption, it fuels the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, as services sectors are still small and medium-sized enterprises. Most of them are still Hungarian. So it leaves a lot of money to the disposal of the business of the Hungarian people. And of course, by that fuels the economy, but also employability and also economic prospects of many others, not just the families themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, if you want to reflect to each other, now I would let you do that, or we can also give the floor to the audience and let us start our Q&A session right now. So, who is the first to ask a question? I will give my mic.
Hi, I'm Colin Brazier. I'm a recovering journalist and former TV presenter. Many of you will know that tonight is Burns Night. It's the day in the calendar that Scots in particular set aside for the incomprehensible poetry of Rabbie Burns. So tonight is an excuse to have as much whiskey as you like. Many of you will know that Rabbie Burns, of course, penned the immortal words "Auld Lang Syne," which we remember on Hogmanay. Fewer, perhaps, people know that he also was a father of 11 children. And I wonder what Rabbie Burns would make of data released by the Scottish government this morning, showing that in the space of 10 years, the birth rate in Scotland had fallen by 20%, by a fifth in a decade, an astonishing rate of decline. I tweeted about this morning. Last week, I tweeted about Jeremy Clarkson and his current woes. It secured over 1 million views. My post today about Scotland's birth rate secured about 50. How do you get people interested in such a long-term problem? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I mean, I think there is the economic argument. We've got huge shortage of labour at the moment in this country. We've got a record number of vacancies. And I mean, I would say, yes, I'm not terribly surprised because we've taken 8 million people of working age from the population through abortion. Yeah, we should consider that. And similarly, the birth rate, because people now concentrate on small families, but it isn't just economic. There is a growing view that there's an obligation because of the burden on the planet, that you should have smaller families. Well, I would actually argue that if you're in the industrialized West, it is very important to produce children, to educate them properly, and to let them into the workforce. I mean, I think if you start arguing economically rather than morally, regrettably, people will take more interest. I mean, I have to say that. Start arguing morally, they won't. Start arguing economically. I mean, when I talk about abortion, a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, we've heard you on that before." I say, "But you've taken 8 million people of working age out of the, and suddenly you can actually see they're starting to think in different ways that they wouldn't think if I put the moral case, but I put the economic case. That's different."
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. The problem, it needs a culture shift. We have a culture in this country, as I mentioned earlier on, of sort of individual liberalism, which has been developed since the Second World War, particularly the 60s. And, the whole idea of commitment, the whole idea of long-term relationships, I mean, we have a massive problem there. As Angela mentioned, you have to talk about it in real money terms to get any attention to the fact that you quote statistics about marriage and the blessings of it and the fundamental need of families for a state of society. I remember when Philip Hammond was Chancellor, we went along to him, spoke to his senior special advisor, because his big word was productivity. And I said, well, it's interesting, if you look at the charts, we're pretty near the bottom of the OECD on productivity. This is what he was saying. And we're actually pretty near the top on family breakdown. Do you think the two could be connected? That actually, a bloke working in an office or somewhere, if his wife's leaving him, or he's living by himself, et cetera, et cetera. Is he stressed? Is he going to work so well? I'm sure family breakdown has a huge impact on productivity, this individualism that we have. It has an impact on every department of government, housing particularly. We've got family breakdown, so you need 2 houses, because you've got a man and woman. I'll mention one other word, which comes back to reproduction, which I think the word is pornography.
Yeah.
Now, and we've had an avalanche of pornography. Never in the history of humankind has humankind been exposed to this open exposure of human sexual activity to anyone on the planet, including children, who just presses the right button. There's been no legislation about it. And what does pornography do? Well, funny enough, I don't know if you've seen, but world sperm counts are really dropping. Okay, this is going to affect that. But this whole area where men, particularly, are looking at pornography. What does it say about relationships? What does it say about gratification, etc., etc.? Living by themselves, they aren't capable of making relationships because they're just watching these things on the screen. So, I mean, we have a massive problem here, and I just take my hat off to Hungary, and I really do feel that we need to lift them up and, expose your statistics, your family policies to everybody else, and back you up to the hilt.
Yes.
Because that. And you talk in Parliament, Anne talks about it, talking there today, I mean, they're just deaf. They don't want to know. And the ministers, it's all yes, but they never do anything. So, sorry.
I was going to say, one thing that I think hasn't really been covered tonight is the whole issue of multi-generational households. Now, I grew up in a household in which not only did I have my parents, but I also had a grandmother living there the whole time. As it happened, she'd been bombed out in the Second World War, and she came to live with the family, and I had her until I was 14 when she died. But there was a time when multi-generationalism within households was the norm. It was the norm. And yet now we're breaking up into smaller and smaller households. You know, it's unthinkable that Gran comes to live with you. The children must go and get their own property almost before they've taken off their graduation hoods. And actually, I think we couldn't do much worse than look again at multi-generational living. And of course it helps because Gran's there to help with childcare. Gran's there to help with the upbringing. And with teaching them and telling them things. My Gran taught me all my tables before I went to school. I didn't realise I was learning them, by the way. She just used to sing them and I used to sing along. I think we underestimate sometimes the important role that can be played by a large family living together.
Just a very short comment. I can subscribe to everything which has been said. I believe that what here could be very helpful for us at least is that we somehow could break not willing to or daring to speak about families, because whenever you speak about the traditional family, you are already labeled as some sort of a fascist, whatever, anti-progressive, dictatorship loving, whatever. So it is very, very dangerous, but we all know that that data actually shows very clearly all the very negative effects. And I would like to just draw attention to one, which I particularly believe that it is very dangerous. It's this newest idea of not having children because that will save the world. That will make the young generation very, very or the decision of the young generation, it jeopardizes the decision for the families. And I very much subscribe to the need of multi-generational households, whereby I also believe that there is another problem, that grown people are still living with their mothers, like they would be 12-year-olds. That's a very different concept than what you are saying. So in that sense, I believe that we have to address that as well, that yes, you have to go to work, and yes, you have to start an independent life. You don't necessarily have to live in a different house for them. So I believe that we have to address this, and as many celebrities are also advocating for this, this sort of a green sauce on a chosen lifestyle without children, which I respect. I don't mind if they want that, but let's not say that that will save the world. Because what it will certainly do is that, first of all, jeopardize the ability of the youth to decide for families, and second of all, it will make us Europeans diminish from the world and from the map of the world, because others will not decide. So, maybe that's it.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, so many hands. You started there, please. Shall we have the mic? Sorry, here, we're in the second line. Yes.
Hello, I'm Sheila McKenna, and I'd like to congratulate you all for really wonderful work that our society is crying out for. I'm so happy to hear about what's happening in Hungary. It's very impressive. Anne Widdecombe took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking about the stratification of the generations.
Yeah.
So we've got this very unpleasant, the state usurping the role of parents and being a bad parent rather than, ourselves who are good enough parents at least. Along with that, we've got this strong cultural message that older people have bad attitudes, they have bad beliefs, and the young shouldn't be exposed to them and shouldn't have too much to do with them. So I think we need to look at our cultural industries and the messages that they're putting out. And the other thing I wanted to draw attention to is the wider contribution of at-home parents in the neighborhood in their local community. You know, we used to have intelligent women in local areas breathing down the necks of councils. They had some time to pay attention to their local society. And it's a great loss that they're all now employed, fewer people, and mostly only older people have that time to pay attention to what's going on.
And of course, it was also the case that where you had multi-generational households, the elderly were looked after. They were looked after within the family, and they only went into a home if as a last resort when it was absolutely necessary, or if it was absolutely necessary. That's gone. And we now tend to think of the state as the first resort instead of the family as the first resort. I think that's also a major loss of multi-generational living. And the other thing is, of course, children used to stay at home until they married, and they were earning and bringing in money and contributing to the household. Doesn't happen much nowadays. Now, I'm not saying that any of these things should be forced on people, but I do think sometimes we don't actually consider the advantages of what used to happen. I see you laughing. Yours presumably live on the bank of mum and dad, do they, rather than bring home the earnings? But
as the end is approaching, can we have just two more quick questions from the audience, if that's okay? The two gentlemen here. Sorry, yes. One of you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie Downs. I'm a commentator and a student as well. And I want to start by thanking the four of you, because I think everything that was said was really poignant and necessary. I'm 21 years old and I'm at university, which means I've had a lot of exposure to my generation, shockingly enough. And my experience has been that the men are feminine, passive, soft and weak. When they're not chasing girls, cars and clothes, they are locked away in their bedrooms playing video games and looking at pornography. And the women are doing their best emulations of men, traditional men. And so, and both of us, males and females alike, are addicted to comfort and convenience. And so, it's a difficult question, I understand, but what can be done to turn my generation into the types of people that are capable of being mothers and fathers? Because at present, I look at my peers and I am worried about the types of parents they will make. And how can we kind of revitalize the kind of divine masculine and the divine feminine instead of falling further into this kind of homogenization of the two sexes? Thank you.
pass. Pass. We're looking at you.
Well, I mean, I think you stated the problem, frankly. How do we? I mean, as I come back, it's the culture. You know, what I said in the beginning about that deviant, U-curve of deviance. You know, this is deviant. This is deviant from normal human being behavior. Normal since time began was a man and a woman, children, family. You know, the man or I being the father, the mother being the brother. This has all been ridiculed. The media doesn't help. We have to, frankly, the centre-right media, I mean, Brizzy here represents some of that. You know, in Parliament, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to stand up and speak, and you have to keep on speaking, even if you're shouting down. And we have to publicise what's going on in Hungary and in the universities. It is this culture war, as we say. At the moment, the culture war is such that we're on the losing side. But you look at the wars. It's often you're set back, but you have to stand firm. You have to keep fighting. Just keep fighting. Keep putting your foot forward. And in the end, I think sense will prevail. And the data, the stats, the blessings of families in society Just got to keep pushing it forward, got to show it. And the pendulum, everybody was saying, I'm not sure there's anything else but hope.
Just one very quick notion. I believe it is what you are describing is very much in relation to what the youth of now have seen home. How many did not see their father around? How many actually do not yet have any more male teachers? So practically, who is coming from a divorced family, divorced household, usually it's women and the children, and then the school is certainly also not a place where you see a lot of male role models. So I believe that exactly for that we would need a realistic picturing of family life, not the Hallmark Channel, but some sort of a realistic way of how actually families work and how important the fathers who are engaged, who can also wash up the dish, by the way, especially if their spouses are working as well. So I believe the role models are very important in that sense.
So much. You have the lady in the back there. No? Yeah. Please.
I thought you did say you were going to take somebody here. You did say that.
Let's have two final.
Let's have two final questions.
I just wanted to comment on Anne's multi-generational living. It's not only for the fact that the elderly and the children got looked after, but there was a huge benefit of, if you're a girl, your grandmother teaching you things that you just never learn in school, no matter how high level of education you have, and watching your grandparents and then your parents working things out in a relationship then teaches you how to do it. This is why this young gentleman's generation doesn't know, because they just never had a chance to see. The second point is about the sacredness, of motherhood, of marriage, of all those things that you just not allowed to say because, well, I think the free speech doesn't go that far, as I'm sure those gentlemen in the media know. And maybe if we accept the unsavory undertones of the British Housewives League, maybe it's time to resurrect it.
And the gentleman here, that's where we finish the comment section.
Thank you very much for a wonderful session, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wanted to politely disagree with both of you on the issue that it would have to be an economic argument to bring up the importance of the family. I think that the experience of people like Jordan Peterson, and I think that if you look at what has been fashionably done to the alt-right, the youth are craving a moral message. And my sense is that Hungary could not have done what it is doing based if it had a secular prime minister who was not proud of his national identity, who was not proud of his Christian faith. I don't see a hope for Europe, and I say this as an immigrant to Europe, without Christian faith. And I don't see a way out of this nonsense, be it the sexual revolution theology, be it the insanity around transgenderism, be it the insanity around the environmental movement, without some restoration of moral values that rest on Christianity. It seems to me that this is highly unpopular among the media class and among the London bubble. But if you look at the youth and what they actually need, they need a slap across the face and they need a moral message.
Sorry.
After you.
I'm just going to say, you know what we need to do? We all need to pray. If you're Christian, you believe in God, God can do it. Okay, so we all need to pray for family life in our countries and community relationships.
I don't think I was arguing at all that you abandon the moral argument. That was not my position. My position was, how do you catch people's attention? You know, I mean, we had the example of the difference in the millions of views on one thing and 50 when it came to another. How do you catch people's attention? And I was saying, you know, you've got to find something that will begin to convince them that it's even worth listening in the first place. Now, if you want Christian examples, you think of St. Paul. He goes along and he sees a dedication to the unknown God. And he doesn't say disgusting. He thinks, jolly good, I can get in on this. And we've got to be, if I can quote Holy Scripture at you, as wise as serpents. As wise as serpents. And that is because if you want to get anybody interested in what you're saying, you cannot lecture them. You've got to try and catch their interest. Maybe a bit later on you can deliver your lectures, but I would capture their interest first.
As a last argument, what we had the general elections last year, and it was everywhere in the mainstream media that the youth will vote against the government, but it didn't. So it is also something which is put out there as some sort of a knowledge that we have lots of very liberal, very I don't even know how to say them, parties now, opposition parties, but they did not succeed because the youth was not voting for them. So the youth is in if you can catch their attention, they are ready to listen to these messages as well.
And Widdecombe, Lord Farmer, Balázs, Molnár, thank you so much for your invaluable contributions. Please give a big round of applause to members of our panel here.